Hello, and thank you for your interest in the Critter Depot. We breed and sell millions of live insects every week, and today we'd like to help you get started on how to breed your own superworms. Superworms are a great feeder option for your pet. They have an ideal amount of fat and protein that fulfills and satisfies most reptiles, and superworms also have a low amount of fiber, which makes them easy to digest. One drawback with the superworms is that they have a very poor calcium to phosphorus ratio. So you will need to dust these guys before offering them to your pet. The calcium to phosphorus ratio is a very important metric. So if you want to learn more about that metric, check out the link that we have in the show notes in the video description. But breeding superworms, it's not hard, but it is more complex than breeding crickets. Superworms will go through a metamorphosis. So that means that they have many stages in their life development. So a superworm will first hatch from an egg, and then from the moment they hatch, it will take them about 4 to 5 months until they reach this size. So that's gonna be about 2 inches. Now these superworms here, they are in the larval stage. So what you need to do to breed them is get these guys to convert from the larval stage into the pupa stage. This is the pupa stage. Then about 2 weeks after this stage, they'll then transform into the darkling beetle. Every darkling beetle female can lay anywhere between 300 and 500 eggs in her lifetime. So there's a lot of stages involved, and each stage requires a few weeks for the superworm to develop into the next stage. So this is why we recommend that you document the entire journey by writing down your dates and your notes in a journal. This will help you transfer your beetles and superworms at the correct time, and that'll help you avoid die-offs or cannibalism. And ultimately, this will just help you have a consistent and reliable supply of superworms. So the very first step that you're gonna do is you're gonna buy your superworms. So this is what you're buying. Now, many breeding guides recommend that you start isolating them right away. And for your first batch, we actually recommend that you give them about 1 week to get nourished and fed. So after you get them in the mail, put them in a bin with some type of oats, whole wheat, just make sure it's ground up, and use that as a liner for the bottom. We're using our bug food for the bedding material here. And then give them some type of hydrating food source, like some lettuce, or you see here, they really like these banana peels. And this will hydrate them, and then load them with the nutrients, and that'll help them pupate. So let them do this for about 1 week. That way they'll be ready to go into their deep sleep and pupate with a lot more efficiency. So after they've been well fed for about a week, that's when you need to stimulate them to transform them into the pupa stage. So superworms are very unique, and if you just left them in this bin, they would not transform into the pupa. The superworms don't like touching each other, so the way to stimulate them is to transfer, is you have to isolate each one and then place them into a dark, warm area of about 80 degrees. There are different ways to isolate them, and we're always recalibrating our strategy. But right now, we like to use these deli cups. So these deli cups, they're inexpensive, they're reusable, and they're also stackable. So we can put a bunch into our bins and help save space, and it's a great way for residential, anyone trying to do this residentially, to start breeding their own superworms. So then just imagine doing the deli cup process for all of these superworms and everyone has their own deli cup. So after you isolate them, you'll then need to put them into a dark, warm area that's between about 75 and 85 degrees. A dark bin is great because it'll prevent light. So imagine a big tub like this, and then you're able to just take all those superworms that you just cupped, and then you just start stacking them inside. So just envision that all those superworms that you just saw in the previous bin, they're all put in the deli cups, and then they're lining the bottom, and then you're raising them up. Then you put the lid on top and just place this into a safe, warm area. You can use a translucent bin, but then you would want to cover it with a dark blanket. Because the darker you can make it, if it's pitch black, that'll really help shut these guys down and trigger that metamorphosis process. So then in about 2 to 3 weeks, after they've had a chance to just settle up in this pitch black bin, that's when they're going to transform into the pupa. So in about 2 to 3 weeks. And at this stage in their life, they kind of resemble an extraterrestrial. So you can see here, they're definitely a lot different than what the superworm looks like. You would not want to feed this to your pet. They have a very hard exoskeleton and they're practically immobile. You can tell when these guys are ready to morph into a beetle when their legs start to get a darker complexion than the other body parts. So this guy, he probably needs a couple more days. You can tell his legs are starting to get a little darker. Now this guy here, he'll probably transform either today or tomorrow. He's at a point where his legs are really dark, his body's a little enlarged, so I would expect him to have transformed within the next 48 hours. So after they turn into a pupa, and then you'll want about 1 more week, and then they'll finally transform into a beetle. As soon as they turn into the beetle, they're really white. They have a white back. They're real tan color. Then the next day they start to get a little darker. So you can see here, this beetle here got a little darker, so it's brown. Then after they turn, then in about a day or two, that's when they get really, their real deep black color. So imagine you have this tub full of all these cupped superworms. It's been about 4 weeks and all of your cups are suddenly full of beetles. So, and if that's the stage you're at, that's exactly where you want to be. You're doing great so far, but you're only halfway there because now we have to take all these beetles and put them into a breeding bin. So a Rubbermaid container makes a great breeding bin, but you can use any plastic container as long as it provides the right spacing and food. So the tub that you see here, it's about 1.5 feet wide by about 2 feet long, and you're about 1.5 feet deep. Now, inside this bin, we have probably between 50 and 75 beetles, and you're probably wondering where they are. And if you just flip it over, you'll see this is why you add the egg crates. So they like to congregate into the egg crate, into the nooks and crannies, and that's where we're going to be doing most of their breeding. But the first thing to do, after you get your bin, is you want to line the bottom with some type of ground oats or whole wheat. Here we're using our bug food because the beetles, they're going to end up laying their eggs inside of this bedding material. So it is important that your bedding material is about 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep. Then after you have that set up, that's when you want to put your egg crates in because the beetles will get more comfortable. They'll have a place to hide. They'll all congregate, and that's where they're going to start breeding. So let your beetles dwell in this habitat for at about 80 degrees and for about 2 weeks. Now, the biggest issue we see is that sometimes people who try to breed at their homes, they don't put in enough hydrating food for the beetles. So you will want to check this bin every day to make sure that the beetles are crawling on the vegetables or the fruit or the banana peels, just to make sure that they're getting hydrated from the vegetables. If they're not, what will happen is they will look for the eggs and eat the eggs or eat the baby superworms, and that's where they would get their hydration from. And we don't want that because that would defeat the purpose of this entire operation. So when going through this process, just make sure you're checking this bin every day so that they're still eating their vegetables or the banana peels or whatever else it might be. So you can see here they were on that banana peel. So after you've had this bin set up for 2 weeks, you won't be able to see any of the eggs. The eggs are way too small. They blend in too well with the grain. So you'll just have to assume that the beetles laid their eggs and that they did not eat them. So after 2 weeks, you'll want to take all the beetles that are in this bin and put them in a new bin that's set up the exact same way with the same bedding material. Then you'll want those beetles to dwell in that bin for about another 2 weeks, the exact same way they dwelled in this bin. And then that's your process. So every 2 weeks, just relocate the beetles, and most of the beetles should be congregating in this egg crate. So it would just be easy to relocate the egg crate into the next bin. So you just continue that cycle until your beetles just end up dying off. So now that you transported the beetles into a new bin, you will have a bin full of superworm eggs. So this bin, you're going to keep this bin at about 80 degrees. And then in about another 1 to 2 weeks, if everything went well and the beetles didn't eat the eggs, you should start to see some little baby superworms inside this bin. So these superworms, they're about 1 week old. And then from this stage, it's gonna take them about another 4 to 5 months to reach the 2-inch size that you initially ordered. So with this bin, the same principles apply that you had with your beetle bin. Make sure that they always have a hydrating food. So this bin, at this point, it looks like the lettuce is starting to get dried up. So I'm gonna end up replacing the lettuce with some fresh lettuce just to make sure that they have some hydrating food they can munch on, because superworms are cannibalistic. So if you deprive them of any hydrating food like lettuce or banana peels, apple core, potatoes, anything like that, they will go after each other and try to eat each other. So we want to have a healthy population. So if you provide them with the food, you can prevent any type of cannibalistic behavior. So that's the process. That's the metamorphosis stage. So as long as you follow those steps, you can anticipate a readily supply of superworms for your pet. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comment below. Thanks a lot.